Hello everyone, it's Dark here with another video. In this video, I will give my final verdict of if it's worth switching over to Final Fantasy XIV from World of Warcraft. The goal of this video is to give players who are thinking about switching over some information to help them make the decision, as I know there's a lot of hype surrounding the game right now. The simple answer here before you get into the video, it depends on what type of player you are, meaning what aspects of the game do you enjoy the most and value. And based on that, you can make your decision. I go over different criterias in the video, so you can make your decision based on that. And at the end, I will give my own verdict. Thank you all for sticking to the series, and I hope you enjoy this last one. The topics I'm going to be going over in order are role-playing and story. So this is for players who enjoy that aspect of the game. The second criteria is alt friendliness. The third one would be player time value. The fourth one is the solo/new player experience of the game. The fifth one will be professions. The sixth one would be endgame dungeons. And then we would go on to rating, combat, PvP, class design, and listening to player feedback. I will give a brief overview of each criteria, as I do have a more involved video for each one in the series. I will put a link in the description if you want to go in for more. But the point of this video is to skim through all of these different criterias and give you an overview so you can make a final decision by yourself. Just to give you guys some context, I did make it to the to level 80 in Final Fantasy XIV. I did play all the dungeons and the raids. I didn't do any of the Savage or Extreme raids yet, but I did try out all the different other aspects of the game, and I even tried a lot of the different classes as well. So with that being said, let's get into it. Right, when it comes to role-playing and storytelling, Final Fantasy XIV just does a superior job compared to World of Warcraft. So if that's something that you really care about, then it's a great game for you. They have great storytelling through the main story quests, great voice acting, a lot of cutscenes, great music. The story is very cohesive, even in between the different expansions. You can clearly tell that the story has been thought through before actual making of the game. Another cool thing about it is that you're the hero of the story, and the game certainly makes you feel that way. They make the story very immersive and have you create relationships with the different characters, and even have you experience parts of the story through them, which I have available in another video, which I'll link in the description for you guys. And you can clearly see aspects of the story that happened in the previous expansion have emerged in the future expansions, and they clearly have an effect on the gameplay that you have. So again, if you really care about the RPG and story element of MMOs, I would definitely recommend switching over to Final Fantasy XIV. I can only say one sentence about alt friendliness, and that is Final Fantasy XIV is the definition of alt friendly. I only understood this after I played the game. So if you're a player that wants to experience all the different classes and you're an altaholic, then Final Fantasy XIV is the game for you 100%. You have one character, and with that one character you can basically be any class that you want. And each job is defined by the weapon that you equip, and as soon as you change your weapons, you basically change your class. So for example, if I wanted to go from my level 52 Dark Knight to the level 80 Paladin, I just click the buttons to equip my Paladin gear, and all my spells changed and everything. It's as simple as that. So there's no need to create different characters. You don't need to do any pointless grinds. You don't need to do renown. You don't need to farm soul ash and all the other stuff that you have to do in WoW. Some other examples are when you unlock flying on your character, it's unlocked for you on all of your classes, no matter what level they are. So even if I change to my level 1 monk, or if I change to samurai or anything, I'll have flying unlocked. There's nothing I need to do. You get 100% XP bonus on your jobs, which are lower level than your main. You have a lot of ways to level. You even have something like Torghast, a deep dungeon, where you can just play solo and get levels. And to top it all off, you can even get gear for your alts as you do dungeons on your max level class, because you get tokens and you can spend those tokens on gear for your alt as well. And the list goes on and on. This is not, it doesn't get summarized to this. There's much more, but as I said, this is just going to be an overview. So it's just great. Like, for alt friendliness, it's just amazing. So let's move on. So if you're a person that really cares about the company valuing your time as you play the game, again, Final Fantasy XIV is superior in this aspect in many ways. And I'll go through a few examples just to give you guys some context. So, for example, in order to unlock flying in Final Fantasy XIV, you just go around the map and collect these things called currents as you're questing. And once you pretty much collect all of them, you unlock flying in that zone. There's no rep grind. There's no, spending crazy amount of currency for it. If you want to farm a mount from a raid boss, if you get unlucky with RNG, they have a solution for it. Each time you kill it, you get a token, and after collecting a certain amount of token, you can actually buy the mount from a vendor. For the quest that you have to do in FF14, you don't have to collect 10 to 20 items with low drop rate. It's usually involving like collecting 3 or 5, and the drop rate is pretty high. The dungeon drops currencies, which you can actually use to buy the items that you want from a vendor, even if you don't get drops from dungeons. And they even built a system so you can queue for dungeons with the NPCs in the game, so you don't have to wait in long queues as DPS. And the list goes on and on. It's really apparent when you're playing the game that they really value your time as a player, in every aspect, I would say. Alright, so if you're a new player or you want to play single player for most of the time, again, Final Fantasy XIV is definitely the better game. They do a great job teaching the game as you go through the main story. This comes in a few shapes and formats. They have a lot of tips and hints that pop up on your screen. They give you a complete tutorial on how to play your role in dungeons and even your rotation. And they award you with gear so you don't go in there without sufficient gear and have a hard time. They also have a channel where it's full of different mentors, which are basically players who are very good at the game, and they help you as soon as you type your question and put it in the chat. I even had the instance where I was playing DPS and I was having a hard time finding a queue, and one of them, who was a healer and a tank, just partied up with me just to help me get in a dungeon. I was basically able to level, do all the dungeons and the raids, and I only had to use Google twice, and I didn't even need to have any add-ons because the game pretty much had everything you needed. And the last point I want to say is the community is also quite different in Final Fantasy XIV. I thought it's a meme, but when you actually come and play the games, or if you're in the dungeons, you notice that people are a lot more chill and helpful if you're new. You also get an icon, a sprout icon next to you when you're new, so people know that you're new to the game, and are a bit more lenient when it comes to the dungeons and the mechanics. I think around 50-60 days that I've been playing this game, I only had one bad encounter in the whole time I played Final Fantasy XIV, where people just rage quit the group. Alright, as far as professions go, I think the two games approach it very differently. So if you are someone who's really into professions and want to fully immerse in it and play the game just for that, then Final Fantasy XIV is definitely the way to go. But if you want professions to just be like a quick side thing that you make gold from, World of Warcraft is the play. Final Fantasy professions are just like a full-on class job. They have their own skills, stats, gear, and level. Each profession has a whole story behind it that you have to play through. And as far as crafting goes, it's quite involved, and it requires you to even execute a rotation to get the most out of it. So it's really involved, and I can't explain it in this small segment. So I do have a detailed video, and it's linked in the description. If you are interested, go take a look at it. But again, if you really are interested in professions and getting fully immersed in it, then FF14 is the way to go. So let's talk about dungeons. I have to say that both games have really good dungeons, which are quite fun to play, and especially if it's your first time. The designs of the actual dungeons and the encounters and the music are all great and awesome in both games. However, if you are a Mythic Plus player and that is the most important aspect for you, Final Fantasy XIV is not the right game for you. They don't have any higher difficulties for dungeons specifically, so you're not gonna get anything out of it if you level the whole way up to 80 and go through the story just because of doing challenging dungeons and pushing it. You're not gonna get anything out of Final Fantasy XIV, and I don't think they have any plans to add it in the game. It seems like the community is happy with the way things are. So again, if you're a Mythic Plus player, I would just stick to World of Warcraft. Now, when it comes to raid, again, both games have quite a lot to offer. They both have multiple levels of difficulty when it comes to raiding. In Final Fantasy XIV, the difficulties are known as normal mode, savage, and ultimate. And in WoW, it's normal, heroic, and mythic. Even though I've not done any ultimate or savage raids on Final Fantasy XIV to be able to compare its difficulty, I have watched some videos on it because I haven't had the time to get into a guild and jump into them. I would say the only major difference that I've noticed in the ultimate fights or the savage fights in Final Fantasy XIV compared to World of Warcraft Mythic is that in Final Fantasy XIV on higher difficulties, the fight is completely different. The bosses have completely different mechanics, while in WoW they also have extra mechanics, but it's kind of additive to the previous mechanics that bosses have. So that's one major difference that I noticed between the two games. But I think if you're a raider, both games have something to offer. All right, let's get to the one of the more juicy subjects, combat, which I think there will be a lot of alternating opinions about this one. So if you're like me and combat is a big deal for you, this is where I think World of Warcraft does a better job. In Final Fantasy XIV, combat has a certain lag with its animations that really threw me off when I was playing. That, and there's the GCD between abilities is longer than World of Warcraft, and it's definitely noticeable when you play it. To make sure it's not just me, I was watching a bit Bellular and also some other WoW players who were trying this, and I noticed that they also noticed this as well. In WoW, the combat is very responsive and fluid and sharp, and I think the best way I can showcase this is through an example. So I'm here on my warrior right now, and I want to showcase the taunt ability in World of Warcraft. So as you can see, here is an ad, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to taunt. I'm going to click on it so you guys can see, and look how fast, how sharp the animation is and how quick the ad actually gets taunted towards me. You can see it's actually right immediately, right? Like every ability that you use in WoW, the animation is really quick, and as you can see, the GCD is so fast that you can use abilities in pretty quick succession after each other. Now I want to show you the exact same thing in Final Fantasy XIV so you can actually see the difference. Alright, so I want to show you guys the same interaction in Final Fantasy XIV. So I'm going to taunt the mob, and you're going to see that there's going to be like a 0.2, I would say 0.2 seconds while the animation plays, and then the mob gets actually taunted. So I'm going to press taunt, and you'll see it's going to say provoke, and then the actual thing is going to come and attack me. And also look at the GCD that I'm talking about. So every ability you click, you have to wait a certain amount. They do have abilities that you can press in between GCDs as well, but that GCD is definitely there, and I think you can notice the difference between this and WoW as well. Also, WoW also has abilities that you can press in between GCDs, although I might say that it's a bit more limited than Final Fantasy XIV. Now, because of this, I mean, this phenomenon is also apparent in all the other spells that you have in Final Fantasy XIV. I think it's because of this mechanic that they have such a thing as called side casting, where you can actually cast something, and at the end, before the cast is finished, you can move and the cast still goes off. And I'm not sure if this is because of the game engine, or is it because of the network, or maybe it's due to the fact that the game is also playable on console. I'm not sure what's the cause of this, but since I specifically play a lot of Arena, this was very noticeable to me, and it threw me off. Like, sometimes in dungeons you would taunt a mob and the mob would move a few steps forward and then it will just come back to you, even though you've taunted it right as it's going past you. So I think if you are like me and you really value these pointers that I've been telling you, I think WoW is definitely better in this aspect of responsiveness and fluidity in combat. Alright, so let's talk about PvP. If Arena is your main thing and in PvP, then WoW is definitely the way to go. I tried to do some PvP in Final Fantasy XIV, but I was in queues for over 60 minutes, 90 minutes, and I never got a pop. I'm not sure why that was, so I went and looked into the forums, and apparently there's some imbalance between what grand companies you join, and that's why the queue times are can be very long. And so I saw that other people were unhappy as well, because I thought maybe I'm doing something wrong. But in general, just because of what I talked about in the combat section previously, I think Arena really needs really fast and sharp combat. So like, if you're interrupting a spell cast, or you're doing a stun, you need it to happen immediately, or else I think it's going to be very painful. I think WoW in general has very unique Arena gameplay. I don't think any game comes close to it from all the different MMOs that I've played. Although I'm going to say there's a huge barrier of entry into Arena, unfortunately, because you need a lot of game knowledge and people to actually play with you and teach you. But it's extremely fun and challenging to do Arena, in my opinion. Alright, class design is an interesting topic, and take this with a bit of grain of salt. So it really depends on what you're looking for. So World of Warcraft does a pretty amazing job when it comes to class versatility and coming up with different builds and playstyles. So with all the different options you have for talents, and even though it's been simplified from what we had before, but even with these talents and the PvP talents, you can really change the playstyle of how you play. And also with the way the gear works in World of Warcraft and how you can have different stats on your gear, and you can buy different gears with base stats, it really changes your play. So for example, as a Venthyr warrior in arms, when you're doing PvP, you could really go with crit, or you could go with haste, and you can optimize based on that and change your playstyle accordingly. But that's not really something that Final Fantasy XIV provides, because when you're getting gear, you're usually getting you're not really changing around the stats. You do get to change the materia and it's kind of like gems, where you put different gems in your gear. What Final Fantasy XIV does offer, though, is that, for example, if you look at the Paladin spellbook right now that I have here, there's so many buttons to press, and they're all part of the rotation for Paladins. So there's a lot of there's definitely more buttons to press as part of the rotation. So that's definitely something that it has going for it. But again, if you're someone who likes to play around with builds, try different play styles in your class and mastering it, then World of Warcraft does offer you more. Let's talk about a big one, which is a major pain point for a lot of WoW players: listening to player feedback. Obviously, you know my answer here. Final Fantasy XIV is the clear winner here. As I played through, and this is my personal experience, as I played through the game, as I went through each expansion, I noticed some problems that I was thinking to myself and taking notes so that I can explain it in the videos. But as I went through each expansion, all those problems kept getting fixed, and the game kept getting better. I think this is a great sign that the company is always moving the game in the right direction and they are listening to player feedback. And this is not the case with World of Warcraft, as a lot of us know it. Blizzard kind of does its own thing, and eventually when they do listen to player feedback, it's like 6 months, 8 months later, sometimes even more. They introduce stuff that players don't want from the start, and they keep giving feedback in the alpha and the beta that they don't want this, that's not going to work, but they put it in the game and then they remove it 6 months later. So I don't know what else to say. There's so many people talking about this that it's kind of like beating on a dead horse. So that's that. So what is my final verdict? I enjoyed playing through the story and the dungeons and the raid of Final Fantasy XIV. It taught me a lot. It gave me a lot of perspective when it came to MMOs. When it comes to MMOs, and just because of the combat and arena, I prefer WoW personally to spend most of my time on, because I really enjoy the sharp, responsive combat and being able to outplay people in arena and getting outplayed by people in arena. Both of them I find enjoyable and quite cool. And I like to see people who are mechanically good to react quickly with their classes and make some awesome moves. But Final Fantasy XIV, as you saw in the video, does a really amazing job in all the other aspects. And it does feel that the company behind Final Fantasy XIV does really value its players and their time a lot more. So it seems like a good investment to play it. As for my future plans, I do want to try to do the Savage raids and the Extreme raids if I can find a, I think it's called a free company or a guild. I haven't had much luck doing it with pugs or through the duty finder. And I'm definitely going to play WoW, the 9.1, do the dungeons, do the raids, and get into some arena. So yeah, that's what I'll be doing. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope I didn't make anyone upset, and I'll see you in the next one. Peace.